So what's the paper you're publishing today?
So today we are publishing the Future of Public Services Digital Job Centres. It is the fourth paper in a series that we have conducted with Accenture, which looks at the opportunity to drive public sector productivity through digital tools. We have already looked at the areas of justice, policing and patients. So today we are looking at the scope to improve employment services in job centres.
Is there really, though, still a purpose for job centres? So obviously a lot of people now look for jobs online. There's plenty of platforms you can use to do that. Obviously universal credit means benefits are being applied for online. So do we still need job centres?
Well, I think there's always going to be a certain segment of the labour market which needs support back into employment, and be those services, even if those services are delivered by the public sector or private providers or third sector providers as well. Now, I think this is going to be particularly important in the current economic climate where we're seeing a lot of uncertainty as a result of Brexit. But we need to make sure that policy is focused towards delivering employment outcomes rather than the current focus, which is simply shifting benefit claimants off of benefits.
So you mentioned there, obviously, signals at the moment that perhaps the economy is stumbling and we may well have another downturn. How did Job Centre Plus perform in the last downturn?
Well, in the financial crisis, Job Centre Plus did receive a lot of plaudits for its performance. The labour market remained resilient despite the deepest peacetime recession since the Great Depression. Unemployment peaked at about 4.7% on the claimant count measure. But if you compare that to recessions in the 1980s, we saw unemployment reach 10%. So Job Centre Plus has performed very well, but there is always room for improvement, and this is what we're looking at in the current paper.
And so, do you think we've got the same climate then that they will be operating in, that Job Centre Plus is operating in now as we did with the financial crash?
Well, it's certainly true to say that there are a number of different policy challenges which will make the context and the environment a lot more difficult for Job Centre Plus to repeat its very strong performance in the last recession. So these are twofold really. The first is the rollout of universal credit, which will see the introduction of in-work services. Now, these are a radical departure from the type of welfare policy we have seen in the past, where the focus has very much been encouraging people to return to the labour market. These in-work services will be encouraging people to increase their earnings, so there will likely be teething problems. The second element is the way in which disabled people are helped back into the labour market. The previous work programme received £500 million worth of funding compared to its successor, which the Health and Work programme, which will see roughly 24% of that. Job centres are expected to pick up some of that slack. And so they'll be challenged in new ways which they were not in 2008-09.
So if there is an economic downturn, we've already got increased demand from policy decisions within job centres, and that will increase it even further. So there's potentially a capacity challenge there. So what levers can Job Centre Plus use?
Well, I mentioned the need to focus more on employment outcomes, and that is going to be enabled by the introduction of real-time tax data. So analysts will be able to have a continuous view of the employment status of former claimants. Now, if this information was merged with the types of tactics that job coaches use to get people back into the labour market, we would be able to develop quite a rich picture of what actually works in employment policy. Now, this is surprisingly an area where we know quite little about. So if job centres could use these insights, they could focus resources, target resources on those who will require the most support. But more than that, we could also make sure that back to work programmes are personalised to reflect the experiences of comparable claimants in the past.
So essentially a much more intelligent approach to helping people and making sure you're matching interventions to need. So the short-term role for job centres is to ensure we get through this downturn. What about the long term though? Is there still really a purpose for Job Centre Plus?
I think there will be, but it will be a far more proactive job centre for employment services to remain relevant. We're seeing a lot of churn in the labour market, and people and firms are needing new skills. Now, sitting at the centre of local labour markets, job centres will be very well placed to get an understanding of where these skill gaps are going to emerge. Now, if this sort of predictive analytics was shared with firms and with local educational establishments, we'd have better investment decisions, we'd see better training programs, and as a result, we'd see increased prosperity.
So not waiting for people to be out of work, but actually trying to understand where the skills development needs to happen ahead of it.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Thank you.